Hi, Emily. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well. It is a pleasure to see you as always. Thank you so much for
Good.
agreeing to chat with me on the second installation of Coldsmoke Founder Series. Um, for those who don't know me, I'm Mark. I'm the founder of Coldsmoke Creative. We're a Shopify Plus agency, and I'm excited to have Emily Lancaster here, who is the co-founder of Nurture and.
Nice.
Um,
Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. The pleasure is all mine. For those who don't know, Nurture and is a s- are you a startup still? Would you
Yeah,
say?
we're a startup. We're a startup, but we are mainly a direct-to-consumer baby and kids furniture brand.
Yes. So you're filling up the whole nursery. Started originally with the crib, or no, with the glider. Sorry,
Yep, 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 yep.
and
And
then
then,
and then
yeah, so we launched. So we're still relatively young. We're about 2.5 years old, but we launched with just the glider, and then from there we've designed and come out with the crib and dresser. So we basically create, design, and produce nursery furniture, and then from there on, we aim to be the destination for all your nursery and kids furniture needs.
great. And we'll jump into all of that in a second. But first, I thought it'd be helpful if we could just jump into like your background and your experience leading up to co-founding Nurture and.
Yeah, would love to. I have been in the so it's funny, I've been in the startup world for the majority of my career, and then on top of that, I've been in the furniture world, as for the majority of my career as well. But I co-founded a company called Havenly, which does online interior design. So for a flat fee, we'll design your space for us, and then you buy all the furniture through us as well. So I co-founded that company almost 10 years ago with my sister, who still runs it. I then went to business school at Wharton, and then I started Nurture Ann with a friend of mine. We launched 2.5 years ago, but we've been working on this business for about 3 to 4 years now. So the majority of my career has been in like effectively direct to consumer or consumer facing, I suppose. And then I just happened to find this love of furniture, I suppose. Great, nice chunky AOVs and stuff like that. So that's also been where I focused the majority of my career as well.
Yeah, and when you started Nurture and, I thought it was so interesting that there was that crossover from your previous experience at Havenly, and I
Yeah,
think I was, if not the first
I was
customer of
thinking about
Havenly,
that.
I
Yeah,
was one of the first
do you
customers.
remember we said that we were so poor? We were so cheap too. I think I found like a photographer on TaskRabbit to send
Mhm.
to your it was a bachelor pad in Seattle.
Essentially. Yeah.
Yep. And then we used it for our hero image on our website for a really long time. But I think the TaskRabbit was like 80 years. Like, wasn't there a funny story behind it? Like, I don't know who this photographer was. And we're just like, here, take some photos for
But they
us.
clearly did a nice job. I mean, hero imagery,
Me-
it turned
Yeah,
out great,
that was
and
like that was 10 years ago. That was 2013 when we
yeah,
did that. So thank you for that.
you're welcome. I'm waiting for the royalty
Yeah,
checks
yeah,
in the
yeah, yeah.
mail.
I'll have to find. I wonder if I have a screenshot of that hero image. But yeah, that was back in the day. You know what? When we launched Havenly 10 years ago, Shopify, obviously Havenly is different because it's a custom platform and it's not necessarily direct to consumer like, you know, what Shopify provides today. But it is so funny. You had to kind of everything was so customized and it wasn't as simple for a non-developer as it is today, if you will.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. That's pretty funny. I still remember the stripes on
Yeah,
your
the quilt.
yep, yep, yep.
And
Ah,
I have
nice.
a very nice picture of my dog Randy sitting on that. From, I
That's
don't know if it was from the photo shoot or if it was just something I did shot by iPhone, but
yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, it was great. It was a great experience. It made that quote unquote bachelor pad. It was like a shared house with two other guys, and it made my room really elevate. I think prior to Havenly, I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor,
Yeah, so at least we got you off the floor.
so it was a major
Oh,
upgrade.
yeah, there you go. So funny. Oh,
Look
man.
at us now.
I know. Oh, man. Ugh, gosh, 10 years goes by fast, but
Goes by fast. Um, so, to that point, a lot has happened in 10 years. Havenly grew, was very successful, raised a lot of money, still is very successful.
Mhm.
Um, and in that 10 years, you've moved on from that business, went to business school, started this new business, started a family.
Mhm.
And I know that Nurturan, in addition to your experience at Havenly, in the furniture business, so to speak, furniture and design, Nurturan was founded for parents by parents. Um, and your first product, which is your award-winning glider,
Mhm.
what was like, what was your unique insight, or the how do when did you decide that there was a gap in the market to create that product and the brand itself?
Yeah.
And how long did it take from like ideation to like actual launch, and what was that process like?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I think, through my experience at Havenly as well, just seeing all these other direct to consumer like sofa brands pop up, or like, even like Casper was doing like bedroom furniture and all this stuff. But nothing really existed in the nursery category. And the reason that was so pertinent to me, and the reason I noticed it more, was because I was in the process of having my first child and seeing what my friends were buying. And it was just so interesting. A lot of people anecdotally would be like, oh, like a glider is really important for your nursery. That's where you spend so much time in the first 6 months, because that's where you're like rocking your baby and like feeding your baby when they're up every 2 hours and all that stuff. But everyone had the question of like, oh, what's the best glider on the market, right? Like, or where do you get yours from, or like all these things, right? And so that kind of got the wheel spinning, in the sense that like, that is so interesting that that is one of the most expensive pieces in the nursery. The average price is like $1,000, and yet no brand existed that really was the ultimate version of it, like we had seen in so many other verticals. And so that kind of was like the convergence of everything, like my knowledge of the furniture brands out there, and the fact that there was this white space around the nursery in general. Um, and then kind of getting into it with the way that my life stage was happening, and all my friends were having babies, and seeing what they were buying, and like, they were going to all these different brands and things along those lines, and there was no one centralized place to really buy those pieces. And that's kind of like, where we started thinking through this. We chose the glider as kind of the Trojan horse to get into the nursery, just because we felt like it was a really overlooked product. And, when we looked at the market back when we started this whole thing, really the gliders that were on the market were just effectively like modifications of existing living room furniture, or, they weren't like basic things, right? Like they didn't have stain resistant fabrics. Like any mother or any like father would tell you, who was a newborn, that like you need stain resistant fat. Like that's such a basic thing, but it was crazy how that wasn't really like the norm on the market, right? And so that kind of helped, start the process of ideation and of like designing the chair itself. So the way that we went from ideation to really launching is we started with the product. We always knew, especially as a direct to consumer brand, we needed to have like a high quality product. We opted for premium and really nice materials versus going more mass, I would say, but that was kind of the decision we made in the beginning. And we interviewed hundreds of moms and dads to come up with that list of features that we thought were the most important for the glider that we came out with. And that was kind of it. Like we really focused a lot in the first, call it almost a year, on designing the perfect chair for the nursery. And so yeah, so that took about a year. And then this thing happened called COVID. Um,
I've heard of this.
yeah, yeah, the pandemic, I
Yes.
suppose. So we were supposed to launch in, I wanna say January 2020, or sorry, February 2020? Or sometime around, right when COVID or the pandemic started, right? Like we were going to start like pre-orders and things along those lines. And, unfortunately, our products are made overseas and all of these things. And we were waiting for the container, and it just kept getting delayed, delayed, delayed. So we ended up launching in the summer of 2020, but in a completely different environment, which actually was beneficial to us because people weren't going into stores at all, right? So as a
Right.
direct to consumer brand, you always hope that people will make the leap of faith, especially with the furniture piece of purchasing something online that they haven't tried. Like you always have to kind of grapple with that. But with the pandemic, what was nice is like none of our competitors who might have had brick and mortar stores, like no one was going into their stores either. So we did have that going for our advantage when we launched. But then on the flip side, we also had supply chain issues. It was a chaotic time. So it kind of evens out, but that was kind of the process in the launch, if you will.
Yeah. So a couple big obstacles to getting off the ground. It sounds like you did a lot of customer development,
Mhm.
which is great. How do you take that and then how like for me it seems like a big step to take that information and then figure out how to build a chair.
Yeah.
Like how did you cuz to my knowledge you and your co-founder don't have any furniture design experience.
Yeah.
How did you all take what you learned from the feedback from customers and actually turn that into a product?
Well, we got really lucky because we actually partnered up with a big sourcing company, big manufacturing company who I knew through a friend of mine from business school, actually. And so we were able to really lean on their expertise. And then we also worked with a designer that I knew through my Havenly days. So we were able to really, like us as non designers, we're really able to synthesize, okay, let me take this customer's research, let me boil it down to like brass tacks and like figure out exactly what the functions of this chair were and kind of aesthetically what we wanted as well. But then we did have a great support system to really translate that. I will say that for my, call it the majority of my career being around furniture and being around design, obviously I can't design anything on paper, but we did have a very strong point of view. And then again, I'm a consumer, right? Like people always say, build something that you need or whatever, but like this is the chair I was building for myself effectively. And the bet and the bet was there was enough people like me out there, right? But I think the nice thing about us is that customer feedback loop that like again, some of the bigger guys don't have. And really being able to like tap into that. So one thing I'll say is immediately when we put our original glider on the market, we would start collecting data from customers who purchased and customers who didn't purchase. And that really informed all of our next product categories. So, right now, we have 4 gliders on the market. We launched with just one, but then we developed 3 additional ones based on customer feedback. Um, which again, like us as a startup is really helpful because we're able to be nimble and we're really able to synthesize that and put that into product development. But that's the benefit of being, a small company, a startup, if you will.
Right, because you and your co-founder are the ones reading that feedback, and then you
Exactly.
can just directly go to the manufacturer and be like, "Hey, we need to add X, Y, and Z features
Exactly.
to our next product," which I
100%.
imagine at your unnamed competitors is a 6 month,
Exactly.
12-month
Exactly.
process.
Yeah. So again, we've only been out for 2.5 years, but if you look at our glider category, we have 4 of them out there. We have like a ton of additional products, considering we only launched with one hero product, 2.5 years ago. All of that has really been based on the information we get from customers.
That's great. When you did launch, I know you had all those supply chain issues, but how did you initially market and promote Nurture um, and to build that first customer base?
Yeah, so I would say 2 things. First, the baby space in general, and you know this, you're a dad, like, it's so recommendation driven, right? Like, even, when I was pregnant, my friend sent me, like, an Excel spreadsheet of all the things she bought, right? Like, it's so analog, it's so old school, like, you're constantly asking friends, so we knew that, right? So we knew we had to have a really, really, really good product that people would recommend. And I know it's hacky and I know everyone says, oh, word of mouth, but like truly in the baby space, it has to be word of mouth driven. And so what we did initially, obviously, a lot of the like initial conversions were friends of friends or things along those lines. We also did invest in paid marketing. I would argue that like Google and Facebook and Instagram was a big pillar and remains a big pillar of how we acquire customers. But then I just want to flag that like, reviews were really important to us. People referring to their friends was really important to us. And also we launched at a time where like furniture was chaotic, right? Like it was like 52 weeks to get a sofa, like all this stuff, right? So we were able to kind of break through. Listen, we had some wait times, but nothing compared to our competitors. So I think that really helped us break through as well. In terms of messaging, free shipping, free returns, again, very unheard of in furniture. It's unheard of in traditional furniture. Startups do that all the time, but we were able to message that and again, break through kind of the noise. So I think a combination of those things really helped with the initial acquisition. And then now, obviously we're a little bit more well known and we have these awards and like all this other stuff. But I think in the beginning, that was kind of like the big things that kind of got the name out.
Yeah. And now that you are a little bit more well known, how do you continue to make sure that Nurturan stands out against your competitors?
Yeah. I mean, I would like this is so cheesy, but like continuing to have a great product that is still going to be recommended, right? And then additionally just making sure like, our big thing is can we have a very curated set of items that really serve your needs? So making sure everything we do and everything we put out there the customer actually needs, right? So for example, we were hearing from our glider customers that like, oh, like I just want one place where we can buy like all the big nursery pieces, which is why we came out with our crib and changing table. And now we're one of the only places I think that you can buy all three of those big anchor pieces for your nursery and you get a discount as well. And it's just like, okay, I did it. I'm done. Check off off my to-do list, if you will.
Right.
Um, and then obviously like digital paid is still a big thing. Influencers is interesting. It's not as big as I would argue some other companies, like some clothes companies and stuff like that, just because furniture is more expensive to gift. It's more expensive to get places, right? So, we do have influencers who help us get the name out. And then really just like affiliate marketing and stuff along those lines. But I truly think that like having a really good product, like you can do everything else, but just making sure, especially in the baby and kids space, that it is something that people are talking about with their friends and their families and things along those lines is really important for sure.
Definitely. I want to jump back to like the customer development and getting feedback from customers because I think it helped inform your initial launch. And then it seems like you have these tight review cycles to figure out what additional features do we need to add, what additional
Mhm.
products do we need to add to our lineup. How do you actually like what's the actual mechanism for getting customer feedback? Is there a tool that you're using? Are you using surveys? Do you meet internally to review it? Like what's the actual process if there is one, or is it just like anecdotally we're seeing these emails come through customer service?
Yeah, so I personally read every review and I actually read every customer email that comes in, much to the detriment of my mental
Productivity.
health. Yeah, like I'll do an audit every month of like every email just to flag what comes up. And that's on the anecdotal basis. We do have reviews, right? So we get a lot of information from there. And then we also do a once a year customer survey, which we'll be doing in a few weeks, but we did it last year as well. And basically we ask customers, we kind of dive into like marketing messaging for the items that they did buy, but then also like why didn't she buy our other products, right? What was it, right? And those surveys are really interesting for us, and we try to do it like to maintain the fidelity on a regular basis. I assume now, especially that we're getting bigger, we'll probably do it twice a year, but still we're small enough where I know like every customer question, I know every like review that comes in, and obviously you can't take one anecdote, but especially when things bubble up and you're seeing numerous questions of, oh, I wish it had this, I wish it had this, and you're getting multiples of that, like that's something interesting to kind of look into for sure.
Yeah. Um, what tools are you using for that, like for the customer survey and for reviews?
So for reviews, we use Yotpo, which
Okay,
is
shout out Yapo.
yeah. And then for customer service, we just do Typeform, like, pretty manual analog type thing. And then I spoke to, so last year when we did the customer survey, I also had in-depth conversations with about 10 customers as well. And that survey a year ago was really focused on the glider because we were trying to figure out how to make that better. This year, now that we have more products for the first time, I think it'll be even more interesting to see like, all the different levers that we want to figure out based on customers and what they say.
Yeah. How are you capturing information from people who didn't buy And when you do track them down and they agree to speak with you, is your first question, "How dare you?"
Yeah, no. No, so when I say when they don't buy, it's really like someone who bought a glider but didn't buy like a crib and dresser, right? Like I'm not unfortunately, I don't know if I can go after people who don't. I mean, maybe you could, but you kinda wanna but, anecdotally, I also have friends who didn't buy, right? So I can get some of that anecdotal information, but from, like, an actual survey and, like, data mining perspective, when I say don't buy, it's really focusing on, "Oh, you bought this piece, but why didn't you buy the rest of the suite?" Right? Because that's a big strategy for us moving forward.
Right. Well, I think it speaks volumes to you as a person that you are still friends with the people who did not buy your
Yeah.
product. They went elsewhere. So, I mean, kudos to you.
Yeah. I
Um,
think you were one of them. Didn't you just have a kid? Don't you want a glider?
we already had one. We had one pre nurture and launch.
Okay, fair, fair, fair,
Or
fair, fair.
maybe it was your supply chain issues. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, 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 yeah.
No, we already had one, and I wish that we had one of yours because ours is very not fancy. It doesn't have any charging capabilities. I don't think it has stain proof. Uh, I actually don't even know if we have. I think we've given it away. We were
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah, 'cause
upset with it, but
yeah,
then we didn't get a new one. So
yeah,
I'm digging myself in a hole.
yeah.
Maybe if a discount code comes our way,
Yeah,
for the next one. So at what point, like, so it was you and your co-founder Roberto who founded the company, and I think that you've done a very good job. I think mostly because of Roberto staying pretty lean
mhm.
throughout the growth of the company. But I know you've made some hires recently. What was sort of the turning point or the metric or the milestone that you reached to start investing in team members and start growing the team?
Yeah, so we were 2 people until a year ago, less than a year ago. So we were 2 just the 2 of us, co-founders, and obviously we used agencies, we used some contractors, like, but we really hacked it together, until Q2 of 2022. So then at a point, right, like you start thinking through, okay, what does it look like? But we always really did want to stay super lean, right? Like we didn't want to raise a ton of money. We wanted to have like a really tight team. We have a lot of great partners. Obviously, our relationship with our manufacturing team is really strong as well. So we had them to really be able to rely on. And so we again still have a really tight team, but we do have, for example, like some core competencies, like we just brought on a paid marketing e-commerce head, right? Because there's points where you just know that like someone who might know more can really optimize for it. Actually, you introduced us to one of our first hires indirectly. I think you introduced me to her husband. Um, Nikki, who runs brand marketing, because obviously we're a brand, and like at a point, you need someone to start thinking through that on a holistic basis. So, I think again, compared to a lot of startups out there, we do run pretty lean and we intend to for the rest of the life of the business, if you will. But again, between Roberto and I think like we're very different, but we have different specializations. So we were able to kind of like there wasn't much overlap in terms of what we do, I suppose. Like what he's good at is just not what I'm good at, and what I'm good at, it's so it's nice because we were able to kind of like do a lot within the two of us. But yeah, I would just argue that we like to keep it lean.
Yeah,
Like we're
yeah.
just, and the world has just shifted. Like again, when I mentioned about Havenly, like now with all these tools, right? Like a Shopify, there's like this tech stack that every direct to consumer startup does. And yeah, it's not like you still need someone to be able to like understand it, but like now things have become easier to like change on the back end. That was not the case 10 years ago, right? Like you don't need a developer when you're constantly like when you're changing something on the homepage anymore, right? You can figure it out and learn it yourself. So I do think that in 2023 it has become, I would say, like the hurdle to starting a direct to consumer business or starting a website or whatever has just become a lot lower than it was, call it 10 years ago. There's still other issues and still other things that make it a lot more difficult. But I would just say, in terms of standing up the business, it has become like the tools are just, bar none, especially compared to like the last business I started.
Right, where everything was custom, like you
Bespoke
mentioned.
and like,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, was even, I think, Mailchimp was around, but like Klaviyo definitely, maybe it was, but I just didn't know about it. Like all these things, right? Like all these tools, I just feel like in the past 4 to 5 years have kind of blown up. And what's really nice is they build it for people like me, like non-technical people. And the user interface is really easy and all that stuff. Like that was just not the case, a few short years back, right?
Right.
So
So what does like your back end stack and your marketing stack, what does that look like? And are there any tools or call outs of specific things that you don't think you could live without?
I mean, I think it's like the typical, like, we don't do anything like that creative, right? So it's like the typical, obviously Shopify, and then Klaviyo for emails, and then Attentive for text messages, and then Yotpo for reviews. Like I feel like every kind of company has this, like,
The starter pack, the
yeah, like
D2C apps and
exactly.
services starter
Yeah,
pack.
exactly, right? Like it's just funny because it's 5 years ago or 10 years ago, right? That wasn't the case. You would have to, like, it was just a lot harder to integrate everything. So that's kind of like the bread and butter. I'm trying to think of what else, but like honestly, Shopify, like, the App Store, whatever, is just so nice and easy to discover stuff. But yeah, I would argue, like, I see emails come through from other direct to consumer companies, and you can kind of tell they're all using the same
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Are there any tools that you wish existed that you haven't found a great solution for yet?
Um, that's really interesting. I'm sure. The thing that we worked with you guys on, like upgrades and like bundles and stuff, like that would be cool, like a better app for that instead of having to do that custom. I don't think really existed, or I don't know. I don't think like something very strong exists there. I know there are some apps that do this, like on the checkout, for example, like really upgrade you or like
Upsells.
incentivize, yeah, upsells. And we've looked, like Rebuy, I think is one that we were talking about, but like we haven't started using that just yet. But stuff like that, I think is really top of mind. Just getting like how to increase the AOV and how to increase my customers' cart size is really top of mind for me, right? So anything to make that easier without having to go custom would be great. um, I'm trying to think of what else. We also sell on Amazon, and I do wish the Amazon seller app was a little bit easier to understand. It's not the best, but yeah, I mean, you know.
How's the experience of growing a business where you're relying, or you're trying to get as many sales as possible on your D2C brand for all the obvious reasons. You keep, your margins are better, you own the customer, um, but you can't compete with Amazon's traffic, like, and
Mhm,
that they're a search engine. Like a lot of people start their buyer journey on Amazon. I talked to Michael about this as
mhm.
well, of Piper and Pickle, because they have an Amazon business as well. How much time do you spend focusing on the Amazon side of your business versus the Shopify D2C version of your business?
I would say we do the majority of our time on the Shopify direct to consumer business. But what's nice about Amazon is it's not like, like we use it as a discovery tool, and obviously people do transact, like you said, just the number of people that are on it. Also for us, we're targeting pregnant people, and as I'm sure you remember, like the amount, like even if you're like Kim Kardashian, I'm sure she's spending time on Amazon buying diapers, right? Like you could be the most bougie person, you're still on Amazon for your, when you're pregnant, for like some of that stuff, right? So our customer really lives on Amazon. So that's how we see it. But yeah, I mean, I think the thing with Amazon versus like Nurturan is you constantly have to like breathe life into this brand that's living on my website, and like figuring out like changing the marketing messaging and making sure everything's aligned and like the creative and stuff, right? Whereas on Amazon it is more transactional, right? It's like really based on reviews and like really based on like obviously the stuff that Amazon takes care of, right? Like the 2-day shipping and the returns and stuff like that. Like they already have that. And then it's really focusing on reviews and stuff like that. So I would argue we spend a lot more time on our brand itself, but they feed into each other, right? Like someone might discover Nurture Ann from like a branded ad, right? But then they go on Amazon because it has the prime shipping and they just don't want to deal with it, right? So they kind of live together, if you will. But Amazon is more of like I don't want to say set it and forget it, but it is just like it's a different beast. It's not as like brand focused. You're not worried about, all the things that you worry about that you pour into on your direct to consumer website.
Right. And I don't want to say it's like a necessary evil because that makes it sound maybe a little bit more evil, but it does seem like it's an important if you're going to use fulfillment by Amazon anyways to take advantage of their fulfillment capabilities, it seems like it's at least worth a test to grow a presence on Amazon just because they have so much volume of
Me
so many
too.
eyeballs.
My customers living there regardless, right? Like when you're pregnant, you're on Amazon shop. Like even if you're not going to buy the glider from there, you could discover us through there, right? So I just think like again, 10 years ago, like people, Amazon was like, oh my gosh, if you're a direct to consumer brand, you cannot be on Amazon because it'll dilute your brand. I don't think that's the case anymore. And you see it, a bunch of these guys are selling on Amazon nowadays, right? Like I think Casper and a bunch of the startups and stuff. So it really just has become, we see it as like a brand discovery and also a conversion tool for us for sure.
Yeah. How do you personally stay up to date on like trends and changes in the e-commerce industry? Are there any newsletters you read? Are you going to conferences, podcasts? How do you stay up to date? Is it just the day-to-day
I
running of
just
your
pester
business?
you. Yeah, I just pester you on what to do. I am not very trendy. I do have a few like direct to consumer newsletters. I'll have to see what exactly they are. I used to listen to Nick Sharma has a good podcast that he runs with the guy from who founded Native, the deodorant company. So
Yep.
I like to listen to them just because I'm not a big podcast person, but sometimes they bring on people who have done it. And what I like about them is they're also really focused on direct, like the way that we run our business, which is direct to consumer with raising very little capital, with like understanding that a direct to consumer business is not a SaaS business. So you cannot raise money that way. You cannot run your business that way. Like you do have to pay attention to unit economic, like things like that, right? So they're not one of those. At least their point of view is very similar to ours, so I do learn a lot from them. I think Sharma also has a newsletter that I'll listen to or I'll read as well. And then we have two really great advisors that we really lean on. One who's like was the CEO and also the president of like a major baby category brand. So we really lean on her for trends and things along those lines, especially industry specific in the juvenile space. And then our other advisor is more, he exited a direct to consumer business, right? So we lean on him for like, okay, what did you do for X, Y, and Z in the actual like conversion world? Whereas, our first advisor is really industry specific. So we kind of have that to support us. um, but then I also try to like, trends are so funny because like, one day everyone's telling me that I need to be on Clubhouse, and then the next day, like Clubhouse is gone,
Clubhouse
right? So
doesn't exist. Yeah.
yeah, so like, and I'm old, like I'm like, maybe 5 years ago I'd be like more, trendy, but I like to see how things play out. Obviously, like TikTok is here to stay, but like the Clubhouse example is a great one of like, oh, everyone was like, you need to like figure out how, and it just, it goes away. So I like to see how things shake out a little bit. Maybe that's not the best in terms of like being a cutting edge direct to consumer business, but I tend to, I like to learn, but then just see what works for us as a business for sure.
Yeah. What was the original inspiration for creating a board of advisors, and have you gotten everything you've wanted out of it, and has it kind of been a surprise maybe how effective it's been? Because I think creating board like a board of advisors is a potentially underutilized tool, or people might think like, oh, we're too small for this. We don't need a board. Like what are sort of the thought process behind getting that set up, and then how have you leveraged it, and how has it had an impact?
Yeah, so a year ago or a year and a half ago, I remember we're like, we just need people to bounce ideas off of because, we were two people for a really long time. So sometimes you can be in like an echo chamber, if you will, or like you just need like a third person to be a tiebreaker sometimes, right? So we went out with the distinct purpose of finding, 2 to 3 people that we were actually going to utilize. So yeah, they're on our cap table. Yeah, they have like some whatever, but we wanted to make sure that we were actually using them, right? So I had like categories, right? I wanted a direct to consumer expert, I wanted a baby category expert, and those are kind of the two worlds that, and if someone was both, that's great, right? But really we just kind of like went out there. I asked my entire network for intros, like all that stuff, right? And just kind of try to find people we would jive with, but also people who would be willing to give us the time, right? Because a lot of time an advisor can be, more in name than in function. And that is not what we wanted because we're also very stingy with the way we think about equity. So we wanted to make sure we were giving, we were getting what we needed, right? So I would argue that in the past, call it year, like we have twice a month meetings where we come up with agendas and we're like we use that time well, and we're very focused on it. And really for us as a small team, it's just nice to have like an external sounding board, right? Um, and who've done it before. Look, like things change, right? Things change quickly. So what might have worked 3 years ago might not work now, but like, these people are best in class in their industries and in their careers, if you will. So it's nice to have that to really pick their brain.
Definitely. I think it's a great tool, and especially as you have a small team,
Yeah.
to get out of your echo
Your
chamber,
world.
essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
I'm gonna ask one more question,
Okay.
and then we'll let you go. But what's one thing that you think brands should start doing that they're not doing, and what's one thing you think they should stop doing with their e-com businesses?
One thing that they should start doing. I mean, I think we sometimes do this as well, but I think we've done a really good job of trying to focus. Like, I will argue that like sometimes I see brands and I get very overwhelmed with their product categories in the sense that potentially they're trying to do too much at once, right? Like, let's say I started off with just like uh coffee company and then all of a sudden I'm also selling like CBD tea. I don't know, that's a terrible example, but like we've been guilty of like, oh, like we've seen this other company do this, maybe we should do this, and it doesn't really make sense for our category or brand or whatever, but we've spent time developing a product and then it just doesn't land even though it's a good product, but like really thinking through why every product that you launch, like what is the reason for existing and what is the reason for existing for your customer. Like there could be other companies that sell that same product or whatever and are really successful, but you have to think about like what your core competencies are and really 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 focus. I really am a fan of like tight curated product assortments just because like I think the days of like the endless scrolling, like, yeah, there's companies that do that, but like as a direct to consumer startup, you want to have like a really tight set, a curated set, and a story that like people can really buy into. So I would say that's like one thing I think we're focusing on and that we've been guilty of in the past of like throwing a bunch of shit at customers that doesn't really make sense, right? And then the one thing, sorry, I don't what that was what they should stop doing, I guess. Don't
Well,
throw.
that would work for both. You should
Yeah,
start being focused, and you should
yeah.
stop being unfocused.
Yes, there you
So
go.
we'll call it a 2 for 1.
Yeah, there you go. There you
Get 2
go.
birds stoned at once, as
Mhm,
they
mhm.
say. Well, perfect. That's a great thing, a great place to end on.
Okay.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat.
Yeah,
Always
this is
great
awesome.
catching up with you. And congrats on the success at Nurture, and it's just been really cool to see you and Roberta start with the one glider and
Now
grow
you're
like you have been.
yeah, and more to come, especially in 2023.
Anything you want to share that you're really excited about with Nurture and coming up in 2023?
We just have a bunch of fun products that I think will really expand our brand and expand the category in ways that we haven't done in the past, and really just like building upon, the success that we've had of the glider and really portraying that and kind of pulling that over into the next products that we have. I'm just excited about that. And then I'm just excited, I'm having another kid, so I can get all the free products, right? Because we didn't have that.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So I get to not worry about my nursery furniture because, I can steal some stuff from the warehouse,
From the
right?
warehouse, exactly. And where can the dozens of people tuning in right now
Mhm.
find your products?
Yeah, so you can find us on Amazon and then obviously on our direct to consumer website, nurtureand.com. And then we do also sell on Baby List. So if you're building your registry, you can add us to your registry for other folks to buy. But that's kind of where you can find us.
Amazing. Nice plug. We'll edit out the Amazon part. Just go straight to
Let's
nurtureand.com.
straight to
You can get
nurtureand.com.
bundles, save a little bit of money. The shipping is going to be great. Don't worry about it.
Yeah,
Shop pay, just as seamless as Amazon.
exactly. And 30-day return. So you can return any, like if you don't love your furniture, you can return it. No stress.
No stress, stress free.
Stress free. Awesome.
Perfect. Well,
Thank
thank
you
you so
so
much,
much.
Emily. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.